Howdy and welcome to How to Forge a Blanket Pin. So before we get started with the forging, I wanted to take this opportunity to show you guys how we can actually use this tool that we're going to make in terms of living history and reenactment purposes, as well as modern day society, including camping and bushcraft. Because with any tool that you make, it's my opinion that we need to properly understand how something works. That way when we're making it, we know the why behind each step. So this is what this one looks like. Now these can come in a range of sizes, meaning diameter and thickness. Okay, this is typically the size that I like to make. And the function is in the name, okay, blanket pin. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how this actually works as a blanket pin, and then we can discuss some alternative uses here. So I'm just gonna push this through the blanket, and this is just a wool blanket, and because of the weave of a wool blanket and how it's made, this is not damaging anything. Yes, it's putting a hole through it, but when I take it out, everything's gonna close right back up. So I pinned the one side. Now I'm gonna take the other side here, and I'm just gonna stick this through, just like that. You're gonna turn it over, stick the pin through the opening of the tool, and then I'm gonna rotate it. And by rotating it, it locks it in place so it doesn't fall off or come out when I'm using it. Okay, just like that. Now, why would we even need one of these? Okay, so for me, in terms of reenactment and living history, or even hunting, okay, let's just go with hunting. When we're hunting, we want to be hands-free, okay, especially when we're camping. When we're out, we want to be hands-free, we want to be able to do things and stay warm, okay? If you guys hunt, you know how it is, right? You're sitting there, you're freezing your butt off. Having this extra layer of clothing is a lifesaver, okay? Now you might be thinking, well, why do we need to be hands-free when we're out hunting and we're just sitting there doing nothing? Well, if I've got my muzzle loader, in this case, to the side, and I'm shivering my butt off, and I see something, I can keep this layer of clothing on me to maintain the warmth, and I can reach over and grab it and do what I need to do. Also, if we're camping, okay, we can complete camp tasks and chores while having that extra layer of clothing on to keep us warm. Now, I've got a lot of equipment on me here, not near as much as I usually run, but I need to be able to access this stuff. Thinking in terms of what if. Well, what if I'm out in the woods and something happens where, it's kind of a oh crap moment and I've got to grab something quickly and I'm freezing my butt off? Well, guess what? I don't have to let go of this blanket and then grab it, okay? I can just grab something that I need and do what I need to do. So let's go ahead and take this off, and we'll talk about some other uses here. So let's say I'm out doing something and a piece of my clothing gets torn or ripped and I don't have a sewing kit on me. I can find some kind of cordage or even thread, okay, and then I can take this and use this as a needle or an awl, okay, so I can actually punch a hole through my fabric, follow with the cordage, and stitch something together. Another use that a lot of people don't realize is that if we have one of these, okay, because it's round and it's forged together like this, this is creating pressure, okay? So anything we put in here, there's gonna be a lot of pressure on that. So again, if I don't have any cordage or anything to tie something together, I can stick some branches through here and kind of weave them together, stick them through here, and the pressure of this is gonna hold those branches together, and that will allow me to create different types of tripod setups. For example, we could use a tripod setup and then hang a pot or something to cook over a fire with. And for muzzle loading specifically, let me grab mine here. Let me dump out the powder in the pan. If I lose my vent pick in a pinch, I can take this pin here and I can run it through my touch hole, clean out the touch hole from the excess powder or the gunk, and I can reprime and I'm good to go. Again, that's just a muzzle loading specific trick. But since that's what I do, I figured I would share that. So now that we know how we can actually use this thing in a couple different methods, let's go ahead and get into the forging. So I'm going to continue on this Scout here, and while I'm doing that, you guys are going to be watching me make some of these.
Okay, so I'm going to be making 5 of these today, and we're going to start off with 3/16 round stock, and I've gone ahead and cut each one of these pieces at 8 inches. And here I am marking a mark at 8 inches and then a mark at 9 inches. The 9-inch mark is going to be how much I'm going to taper the ends of these pieces. And I'm going to taper both sides 1 inch. So the final dimension, the main piece, will be 10 inches long. Now we're going to start tapering the main piece. So I'm going to come in kind of at an angle. You can see that my workpiece is up on an angle a little bit, and I'm hammering on an angle as well. I'm going to hammer and then rotate the piece 90 degrees and hit it again. And of course, it wouldn't be a forging video without me dropping the piece. So I'm just going to continue to hammer and rotate 90 degrees, hammer again, and just continue to do that process. But you can see that the steel has lost most of its heat, and what I'm doing here is just called planishing. So I'm just very lightly tapping the steel to kind of smooth everything out and straighten it out, smooth out my hammer marks on that taper before I put it back in the forge and bring it back up to good heat. Alright, here's the initial heat on blanket pin number 2. Now remember, I'm forging 5 of these today, but for the sake of the video, let's just watch me make 2 of these, because I feel like if you watch me make 5 of them, it's just going to get very repetitive. So same process as the first pin, just coming in, stretching, tapering this material out, only on the tip, and then I'm going to come in and planish. Planishing is not necessary, but I feel like if we're going to make a tool, we might as well do our best to try to make it look as nice as we can. And we're back to pin number 1. Now, out of this entire set, because I used the hot cut and my measurements were not 100% precise, the stock material for number 1 was a bit shorter than all the other pieces. So here I'm just stretching that material out to get it back even with all the other pieces. So I'm going to work a little bit off of the tip just to force that material outward. But if you're not going to use a hot cut and you're actually going to measure properly and cut everything off at 8 inches, there's no need to continue to stretch this out. So I'm just going to planish, and you'll notice that every time I'm working on a piece, I'm going to straighten it or get it as straight as I can before I put it back in the forge. And same process applies when I make any other tool that's straight. I just want to make sure that everything is nice and straight when I put it back in the forge. It's not needed, but it's personal preference. And same thing for pin number 2. I'm just gonna kind of work that taper back and elongate everything. Honestly, this is just me being a little picky. You can see that I'm measuring to on the edge of the anvil up to that first mark. Okay, so we're there. So I'm going to just straighten everything out. Now back to pin number 1. And we're just going to start tapering out this other end now, just like we've already done for both of the pins. Remember, we want to hit on one side, rotate it 90 degrees, hit on that side, rotate it back 90 degrees, and just repeat the process over and over again. Now, when we're doing this, it's going to create flats on the round stock. And as you can see, the round stock is round, and then where we're hitting, there's flats on it now. So after we taper both of these pins out and get everything to the overall length that we're looking for, which again is 10 inches, we're going to come back in and actually hit on those edges, on those corners, and round everything off. Alright, I've tapered out all the pins, and we've got our overall length of 10 inches. So this is pin number 1, and I'm coming in and starting to round off the taper, get rid of those flats. So I'm doing very light hammer blows, and you can see that the very tip actually cracked and came apart. Now obviously we don't want that, but to be honest, to me it doesn't really matter, because quite frankly I really don't care. It's gonna be hidden anyways, so it's nothing that we really need to worry about. As long as I get this thing smoothed out and round like the rest of the round stock, I'm okay with it. Now if that's something that is a big deal to you, by all means take the time to fix that, but that's just a result of forging on it when it's too cold. Alright, this is pin number 2. You can see I'm starting off by hitting it and then changing 90 degrees, hitting it again. And then I'm going to come in and start hitting those corners. And that's going to actually round off the material on both sides. And then I can start smoothly turning the tongs, or rotating the tongs in my hand, and that's going to rotate the workpiece. Give us a nice smooth transition from that round stock all the way down to the very tip. Just very light hammer blows. I don't need to get crazy with it. Kind of straighten everything out, clean off the anvil. We'll go ahead and put it back in the forge and move on to the next step. Now you might be wondering why we needed to taper both ends of that main workpiece. And that's because we're going to come in and add what are called pigtails to each end of the piece. Now these can be referred to as rolls or even scrolls as well. So we're going to use the edge of the anvil, and we're going to start kind of creating a curve. And then we're going to flip our piece 180. And we're going to do somewhat of a pulling motion towards ourselves with our hammer. Now this is going to cause the material to bend and curve up towards us and create a nice almost circular shape. And this is going to serve two purposes. One, it's decorative, so it looks pretty. It's very simple, but it is a nice decorative touch. And two, it's actually going to keep that main blanket pin piece that actually goes inside of the blanket. That's going to keep that on the tool itself so it doesn't slide off and fall apart when we're wearing it. Alright, this is pin number 2, and we're just going to do the same thing here. So hold the piece at the edge of the anvil, lightly tap it to bend it over, turn it 180, continue to lightly tap and drag that hammer towards us to accentuate that bend, and light hammer blows are the name of the game here. So we'll flatten it out, make some adjustments. Now you notice that this is quite a bit different than the first pin, and that's okay. Alright, to be quite honest, perfection is the enemy here. Okay, this is a handmade, hand-forged piece. We're just trying to make something function. Yes, it's a decorative aspect, but functionality is the name of the game here. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other two ends of these off camera, and then we'll just move right into the next step. And the next step is to actually make the round section of this blanket pin. So I'm just going to use the horn of the anvil to actually bend this piece over. Now the same thing can be done just with a pair of tongs and a hammer, but because I'm making a set of these, this is a lot quicker for me to do it this way. If you are going to do it this way, be extremely careful and wear gloves, because right now my hands are actually getting burned because of my hand placement. So what's happening is, as I'm bending this piece around the horn, the mill scale or forge scale is popping off and falling onto my hands. So I'm going to get it really, really close. And then I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to grab another piece. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Now when we're doing this, make sure that the pigtails or the scrolls are actually facing upward. Okay, if they're facing down, you're going to bend it in the wrong direction. If you do bend it in the wrong direction, all you got to do is take it to the main section of your anvil, hammer it flat, put it back in the forge, redo it. Remember, any mistakes that get made, we can just correct them at any time. Not a big deal. Alright, back to pin number 1, and we're going to set it on the horn of the anvil and start lightly tapping the ends to make them more round. Now by doing this, we're actually closing up that gap on the bottom, and then we'll just take it back over to the main section of the anvil, flatten everything out. It's important to make sure that everything stays flat in this process. And like I said, by hitting on the ends here, those scrolls or pigtails, whatever you want to call it, we're actually closing up this piece, which we don't want them to be touching each other, but we do want them to be pretty close. On to pin number 2. So again, we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to use the horn of the anvil to come in and further accentuate this kind of circle shape of this pin. So again, light hammer blows. We're going to take our time here. We want to make sure to get a nice round circular shape. It's just going to make the whole piece look a lot better. Alright, this is a look at all 5 pieces that are finished for this set, and as you can see, not every one of them is exactly the same. Some of them have more rolls than others. Okay, they're not perfect. Some of them are a little bit bigger, some of them are a little bit smaller. Again, perfection is the enemy here. As long as they're very similar in shape and size, we're good to go. Now we can begin forging the actual pin section of the blanket pin, and for this I would recommend starting off with 2.5 to 3 inches of material, and again we're using 3/16 inch round stock. And here what I'm doing is I'm beginning my taper. So just like we did with the ends, I'm going to taper out this pin section here, and this is going to create the tip that will actually pierce or puncture through the wool blanket. And here we go with pin number 2. So same process, we're going to hit and then rotate 90 degrees, hit again, rotate 90 degrees, just rinse and repeat. Again, this is going to stretch out that material and taper it down to a nice thin point. And again, I'm having some material split off there at the tip just because it's cooling off so quickly. You know, to me, again, that's really not that big of a deal. So we'll just continue to do this to all the pins, and then we'll move on to the back section of the pin piece. Alright, we got all those tapered down using that taper technique, and now we've actually flipped the pin piece over and we're working on the other end. So what I'm doing here is just flattening out the workpiece. Okay, this section is actually going to wrap around the diameter of that main circular piece that we first forged. The objective here is not to taper it. It's going to get stretched out a little bit and elongated, and that's okay. But the main objective here is just to flatten it out. And we want to get it pretty thin. Not so thin that, you know, it's just going to crack on us, but we do want to get it pretty thin here. That way it's easier to wrap around that circular piece. And here we are with pin number 2, and I've already gone ahead and worked this down and flattened it out, but I wanted to show you guys that when we come in and hit it on the side, it's actually going to bend and fold over on itself, and that's okay. All we got to do to fix that is just hit it on the main face there, and it's just going to flatten right back out. No problem whatsoever. Okay, this thing is almost done, I promise. So now we're going to start bending the pin piece over on itself, that way we can actually attach it to the rest of the tool. And we're going to use the same technique here that we did when we put those pigtails or scrolls in that circular piece. So just hold it over the edge of the anvil, lightly tap it to start the bend. And then here I've actually grabbed the rest of the tool, and I'm going to go ahead and eyeball it into place. Line everything up, make sure we're good to go. And then tap it, and it's going to fold over on itself, and it's going to lock in place. Now, it's important not to continue to tap it and get it tight, because we want it to flow freely on that entire tool. That way we can rotate it back and forth on the tool itself like I was doing at the beginning of the video. Alright, I went ahead and did that to all the blanket pins, and at this point, the forging is completely done, so we could just end everything here, and we would be somewhat okay. But the problem is, the second this thing gets water on it, or it gets humid, and we leave it outside, it's going to rust on us. So we need to weatherproof this thing. And to do that, we're just going to use wax, and then we're going to melt that wax onto the tool, and once it dries, that wax is going to create a nice barrier between the tool itself and Mother Nature. Now, to melt this, it's a pretty simple process, but what we're going to do is we're just going to obviously heat up the piece with the wax on it, and it's going to melt onto it. But there is a couple things you need to keep in mind. First of all, do not do what I'm getting ready to do. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm actually taking the tool and sticking it up to the forge, and then what's happening is that heat is causing that wax to catch on fire, and what I'm going to experience is this wax is actually going to melt and drop into my forge, and the bottom of my forge is now on fire because there's wax everywhere. And obviously we don't want that. So if you're going to do this, I recommend maybe putting some wax on the face of your anvil, heating up the piece, then put your piece on the wax. I've also used a container before and then just heated up the piece and dunked it in the container that has wax in it. Well, that's pretty much going to do it. I hope I explained everything thoroughly enough for you guys to get out there and try this on your own. If you guys do this and you have success, feel free to let me know. I'd love to hear about your experience making these things. If you guys liked the video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about anything you saw in the video, feel free to put them down below in the comments section. If you'd like to stay up to date on current projects and upcoming videos, go ahead and check out my Instagram. It'll be linked in the description below. And remember to keep your tools sharp and your mind sharper, and thanks for watching.